Welcome to Intelligent Human Leadership, leading yourself and your team. Do you ever find yourself grappling with a lack of confidence in your team? Or battling the relentless waves of concern and fear? Are the pressures to meet client expectations and the burden of missed opportunities weighing you down? On this podcast, you'll discover the strategies and insights that will reignite your team's morale and help you find the harmony and knowledge you seek to propel your business forward. Here, we explore innovative ways to reignite your creative spirit and achieve greatness, empowering you to lead with intelligence, compassion, and resilience. If you're ready to dive deep into your core of leadership challenges and be guided toward success, here's your host, founder of Steward Your Business, David Carr.
Welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad you're here again this week. And boy, if we ever thought we lived in boring times, nothing like today. I'm still in awe. We talked in the last podcast, and I shifted gears because we had an attempted assassination on a president. And unprecedentedly, we have a current sitting president that is stepping down, President Biden. And so we went from one weekend to the next weekend where there's changes. And so we talked about finding peace in chaos in our last episode. I really encourage you to go back to that episode. I appreciate you guys listening, leaving comments, and feedback there. And so I wanted to take a moment here because what we're seeing in unprecedented times right now is how do you show up as the most intelligent leader? That was what we're here about on the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. How do we get you in that place? And I'm going to dive into it today because whether you are for President Trump in his reelection campaign or you are for the apparent heir that would be taking and running up against Donald Trump, Vice President Harris, doesn't really matter, honestly, where you are on the political spectrum as far as I'm concerned in the purpose of this episode. The purpose of this episode is to target you and understand how do you build consensus? How do you galvanize a team with a unified purpose? Now, whenever there's shifts in leadership, there's always a challenge there. And I don't care if you're Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, or even if Biden was staying in the race, for example, and they're going to take office, there's going to be a shift, there's going to be a realignment. Even though there's an incumbent, there's still going to be some changes there. And what I want to get at here is understand the importance of consensus building, particularly if you follow politics. I'm not a big politics guy in the sense of the day-to-day nitty-gritty. I am aware and an informed citizen. However, no matter where you look at it, there's a convention coming up for the Democratic Party. They're going to have to build consensus as to a new candidate. It's not a foregone conclusion that Vice President Harris is going to be that person. It's maybe presumptive, but not confirmed at this point. And there's going to have to be consensus. There's going to be voting, and there's going to be a decision made. Now, this is on a large scale, a national scale. We're talking. I'm giving you just a high level perspective here, but the point is you have to build consensus on a daily basis with your team and those that you're working with. And if you're not doing that well, if you're not unifying them in the purpose and the focus for why they exist and how they're coming together, you're going to have challenges. And so on this podcast, I want to get to that challenge, and that problem you're facing is you're not unified in your purpose. You are not galvanized in a way of working together. And there's dysfunction either in your own leadership or in leaders or other people in your organization or your team members. And so you have these challenges and you're not getting the productive output that you really want. You're not having the effect you truly desire in serving your clients, making your team and your organizational healthier, right? Attracting key clients, key individuals, key employees, right? You can help and grow the company. What I found in working with some clients is that they miss this mark of galvanizing their team in a unified purpose by knowing the why of the organization. We're going to get into that today. So there's a great book I read years ago called Start With Why, but there was another book that was followed up by that called Find Your Why. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the book right now. Simon Sinek was one of the authors, along with David Mead and Peter Docker. And I went through this with a previous organization I was with, and it was really an excellent resource that I'll highlight a bit here on the podcast about finding and discovering your purpose for you and your team. Now, number one, we're all talking about you first. You cannot help your team if you don't understand you and your personal why. So that is huge. I've given you guys some tools in the past about the 5 voices, a little bit about powerality, and this is where I help you as the individual. We do this one-on-one coaching through Steward Your Business, where we can get deeper in that. But today, I want to at least start to open up this understanding for you on consensus building. Is this even a vocabulary you use or something you consider, right? How do we build consensus? Particularly, I'm going to focus in the AEC industry. That's my background: architecture, engineering, environmental consulting, construction, if you will. And it's very challenging because you've got lots of people with different objectives, different values, different missions. So we have to figure out, how do we unify them? This is a strength that I've been able to develop over the years as a project manager, as a group manager, leading within the company, working on large-scale projects. But it's really important that we develop a consensus and understanding why. What are we trying to accomplish here? What are we trying to achieve here? What's the greater mission, right? And I'll give you an example that I had years ago. I worked on a huge project with Southern California Edison called the Tehachapi Renewable Transmission Line Project, or TRTP, long name. But it was a huge project, 170 odd miles across multiple counties here in Southern California, to strengthen the infrastructure for power distribution within and transmission, really, within Southern California. Here's the thing, though. There's so many people and initiatives. And so we had to be really clear about what we're trying to achieve here. And I was just a part of a team on the biological resources, natural resources, working on a lot of things there. And so how do we support the team? How do we get this done? It was a lot of effort, a lot of focus, and a lot of meetings, communication, intentionality. And so it was regular. Here's something I want to really encourage you to take home. Things are either being built up or they're breaking down. There's no neutral. And so when you're consensus building, you're continually building, you're continually reaching out, and you're working together on different voices. One of the tools we talk about is literally called Build a Bridge in the Giant Tools, where we understand the future-oriented voices and the present-oriented voices, and we build a bridge to help them communicate with each other. That's a way of consensus building. So if you're not actively doing that as a leader, you are creating a space for consensus building around your why, your purpose, what's your mission, where you headed. I'm giving you the warning signs. You're going to have challenges externally and internally. Externally, because you're going to have people asking for certain things, and if your team's not clear on that, they're going to be divided in the way that they're reaching out and solving those challenges externally. Internally, you're going to have division within your folks too, battling with each other because they're competing for resources or competing maybe with other divisions or competing with other people within the company to get things done. And so they're not working well because they're having competing visions or directives or edicts, if you will. So again, you have to understand where you are in the organization, and then how do you build a consensus at all levels? It starts, all the way down. So if you're not coordinating this is another thing I found early on in my career. I worked for a very large firm, a large engineering firm, and this firm was so big, unfortunately, they got siloed. And so the consensus building wasn't there, meaning they kind of like, well, I'm going to go after this project or this proposal. And actually, at some points, they actually had within the same company divisions competing each other. They didn't even talk with each other, going after a same proposal or opportunity. That's how disconnected they were. They would not come together to consensus of how we're going to get this done, how are we going to pursue this, how are we going to divide up resources. And so it became very embarrassing, quite honestly, when you say, hey, we're a big company and we're kind of competing against ourselves in different, let's say, profit sharing units or different areas within the region or company. And so if you're not being aware of this, you're really setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to be undermined in your effectiveness. And we don't want to do that. We want you to be that most intelligent human leader. And so how can we get around that? Knowing we want to build consensus and we want to get people behind us. We want to make sure that we're moving toward our goal, our objective. And so part of that is really like this. I mentioned earlier, this book, just another resource. I pull all these different out of my toolbox, if you will, based on where you're at. But what is our purpose? Why are we doing what we do? I know it may sound a little petty, but one of the things I found in our human development, the way our brains work, is we have a difficult time articulating that. It seems straightforward, but when we actually ask you the question, well, what is your why? What is your purpose here in putting all this, doing all this? And I won't be able to, unfortunately, go on the podcast here. I'm just going to give you highlights here. But it starts with yourself. And it's looking at what motivates you, what gets you excited about the things that you do, and how do you translate that to your team? Now, for me, it was revolutionary when I read that book, Start With Why, and I understood this. The Start With Why book gives many great examples in the book about companies that embrace a certain way of being. Like for example, Southwest Airlines, a low-cost leader. Part of their why is they're not a luxury brand. They never want to. It's not their design to be a luxury brand. They're a low-cost leader. That is part of their why. That is part of what their purpose is to provide low-cost airfare to get people in a quick way, a comfortable way, an effective way. But they're not looking to be, the high-end airline on the same. And so if that was, again, understanding our personal why do we show up? It's not bad or good. It's just that's their purpose, right? And what I find sometimes is people get lost in clarifying their purpose, and your team is not quite clear on your goals and your values. I've talked about this in previous podcasts. In fact, I have a whole nother podcast outside of this intelligent human leadership, which is called the Business Roundtable podcast, where I actually have other individuals come. Here it's just me, but on the other podcast, I have other guests that come on there as well that share from different perspectives and are different coaches, and I think that's valuable too. But here it is important that we articulate to our team what is our why. And one of the things I did that was really a great tool is, especially if you're a smaller firm, I think this is particularly valuable. It's not bad if you're a bigger firm too, but let's just say if you're a smaller firm, what I call it is if you're early on in your career, let's just say you've built this company, you're 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years old possibly, but I'm hoping before you get to making the 10-year mark, you have worked on what is the persona, if you will, of your organization. Oftentimes it takes on us as the initial creator, entrepreneur, founder, if you will, but it has to become more than just you. And I worked through this and spent a good amount of time with a former owner of the company, and we wrestled through it. We kind of came up with statements and ways of what is this organization going to be beyond the original founder, even beyond me. Originally, as I came on as the chief operating officer, we had to figure out like this got to be something bigger than ourselves. And so even as I create Steward Your Business, I'm looking for this bigger version of what Steward Your Business is going to be, not just David Carr coaching and consulting, but leading a team and impacting multiple teams and companies, not only in California, but beyond the United States. There's this bigger vision of what is our purpose, who are we about, who do we want to serve, and developing that. And so I definitely highly recommend the Find Your Why book. It's a very simple book that you can look at and look it up, and you can certainly do this on your own. But I will tell you, when you hire a coach or a consultant like myself, who's done this with other clients, done this myself, it'll go faster. And that's what we're kind of looking for: is how do we collapse time, get clear on this? The quicker we can get clearer on our clarifying our purpose, then we can get back to consensus building. Number one, we want to understand it. Like I said at the beginning of this, are you even building consensus? And then how do we actually get there and start doing it? So number one, do you understand your personal why? And then how does that fit within the organization that you're serving in, that you're helping with? So for me, my personal why, you may have heard me talk about this in the past, is to bring people together to accomplish great things. Now, I've done this through the course of my career. I didn't realize this at the time when I was finally able to articulate this, but then it was my filter for doing everything else. And as a project manager, I bring the different resources together, empower them, let them do what they do best, and get the job done. And that's what I do best. And so when I'm in that place and I'm understanding that, then I can help folks and I can empower them to say, well, what is your why? What's your personal why here? What drives you, and where can you show up? How can you contribute, right? We're looking to foster an environment of open communication, being transparent with one another, so we don't feel guilty, we don't feel shameful of like, I don't show up this way. In the giant language, I'm a connector. A connector is resourceful. I'm people-oriented. You don't necessarily have to be that same way. In fact, if everybody was the same way, we'd have difficulty in accomplishing the mission because we'd all kind of be lopsided, if you will. We'd all have one set of skills and not the others that we need. And so we want to encourage collaboration. We want to hear those different voices, if you will, in building the consensus. Again, naturally people tend to be more future oriented in their voice, and others are more present oriented. I work with a woman right now who's a nurturer, and nurturers are the quietest voice. And so what happens is, if you're a leader and you don't understand this about yourself, how to unify folks, you may neglect to engage that voice because you're like, well, they're quiet, they're not saying anything, they must be fine. If you're an intelligent human leader, you're the healthiest person in the room, you recognize, I need to hear every voice on my team. How do I get that out of them? How do I elicit their input? Part of it is being quiet, being still, inviting them, because oftentimes you're going to have people on your team that will tell you very readily how they think, what they believe, and you have other people that will need to be asked for their input. It's very easy to pay attention to the people that will tell you and are very vocal. I want to encourage you to be present and engage those others, particularly as I've learned, those that are nurturers or guardians. Those are common. Those are the common voices in the 5 voices language framework, where that's the majority of the voices. Unfortunately, in leadership, oftentimes we have very future-oriented voices, such as the pioneer, connector, creative, as myself. Just think about this for a minute. If you're in a leadership role, are most people looking in the future and all the things that are coming in the future, or do you have more people looking at things in the today, the here and now, and how people are gonna feel with any China changes? In my experience, I've come in the leadership roles, come with more folks that are more future oriented than they are present oriented. So what you need to do is, if you're not listening and build a consensus with those other voices, you're going to have a challenge in implementing whatever the great vision you have for your company or your team. And so I want to encourage you to listen to those other voices, and that when you can make a decision or a choice being informed. you've ever made a decision and you didn't have all the information, or at least you were missing a chunk of very vital information, and you look back, you're like, I would have never made that decision if I understood the ramifications this would have had on my team. Oftentimes you'll see this happen where people make decisions, or laws are put into place, or edicts are put into place, and they have unintended consequences because they didn't think all of this through. They didn't get all the other voices. They didn't build a consensus. Now, I'm not saying you have to have a consensus in everything. Don't get me wrong here. But I'm telling you in this episode how important it is, particularly when you have a large group of individuals. Well, it doesn't have to be even large. It just has to be a group of individuals that are disconnected or disparate, or they basically don't have the same shared vision right now. And so you're going to have competing priorities. We've talked about this in past episodes with short-term and long-term competing priorities or tasks, goals. And so you're going to have resources that are going to be drained or put upon if you're not clear on this. So here's the thing, when you spend this extra time, if you will, but if you spend the time here on the front end getting this clearer, you're going to reap dividends on the back end. And that's really where I want to help you be that most intelligent human leader. Now, oftentimes we haven't developed these skills yet, and it's understandable. I get it. Particularly if you're new into leadership, maybe you've been managing a team, managing yourself, and now you're taking on more of a leadership role. Well, what I found, unfortunately, is it's kind of learned by error. And you're like, oh, I didn't realize I needed to do consensus building. I didn't realize I needed to clarify the purpose, right? I couldn't articulate my why. Well, that's where a coach like myself or Steward Your Business comes in and helps you. We can move that along much quicker as we work together, using the tools and the frameworks that I have, like this resource, like the Find Your Why book. That is what I do as I curate it for you and help you move that along. What I found is as you do that investment in yourself, it's multiplied over time. And the sooner you do it, the greater the dividends. If anybody's invested, you recognize when, you've invested when you were younger, you've done it well, managed it well, and nurtured that. It grows, it compounds over time. That's what we're looking, a compound effect for you, a multiplication of the investment in yourself. And I've done this for myself and invested a lot. And so you take from the knowledge that I have, take from the experiences that I have of being, 50 years, going through the industry for over 25 years, and leverage that. Don't bang your head against the wall trying to figure out, why isn't my consensus building working? Or why can't I just articulate this why, or get better at getting and clarifying the purpose? Because the longer you do that, there's multiple challenges here. You may lose staff because they're frustrated. You may lose clients because they're not getting the results that they desire. You may end up, feeling lost and feeling like you've got to move, and ultimately you kind of go down a rabbit hole and you haven't really made the progress in discovering who you are and giving the tools to articulate it well. When you become this intelligent human leader, you actually are a place of empowerment. You are a place of recognizing your contributions of your team. You can sustain momentum. And I saw that going from a company from 25 employees to 80 employees. We grew our company together that I was a part of, adding multiple services and exponentially growing our revenue. And so that's where I want to help you. I'm just scratching the surface here on this. I know there's so much more to go for in finding your why, discovering this together. But I want to encourage you to, as you listen to this podcast today, to be a leader that is one of galvanizing leaders and followers coming together under one tent on a defined mission, knowing your purpose, being clear on what you want to do, where you want to go, setting that agenda, and making sure that folks are in alignment with you and want to support you on that way. I don't want you to be with a leader saying, you need to step down. You're not really fit. You don't have the right mix of what we need, and a vote of no confidence, if you will. And we don't want that for you. I want you coming from a place of power and certainty, a place of confidence in leading yourself well and leading others. And that's why I'm here on the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. If you found this information today helpful and encouraging you to be that intelligent human leader, to galvanize your team in purpose with understanding a clear why of what is our mission, what are we trying to accomplish here, I encourage you to leave a review. Comment, give me your feedback. What has been impactful for you? Leave a 5-star review because that really helps me reach more folks. And share this with others. Share this with others that, that may be challenged, and say, I heard this podcast today that I feel like could really help you. It helped me open up my eyes to how I could be a better leader, how I could be more intentional and galvanizing and bringing together the team to reach our goals, to get to that next peak, and to do it in a unified fashion, where you're not leaving behind casualties along the way, but you're bringing them on. In fact, not only bringing them on, you're finding others that want to join your cause and to see the greater vision, the greater mission that you're on. I appreciate you guys taking the time and continuing to come back week after week. I'll be diving deeper into this topic as we go forward into the year, especially as we're going into the election year. There's going to be lots of challenges and changes. I'm sure we're all going to be seeing this, but it's a great look at those that are healthy and positive leaders that are galvanizing and pointing a picture and painting a path of possibility through the challenges, through the pits, and that you might find in. So, if you find yourself in a pit, you find yourself in a challenge, here's a hand out to steward your business. I can help you, and I would love to connect with you. You're not alone. Continue to come back knowing that this is a place for you to learn, to share, and to be a part of a greater community. Appreciate you guys listening to me here on the Intelligent Human Leadership. And until next time, take good care and keep fighting the good fight. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.